Yeah.
Ladies and
What's up,
gentlemen,
guys?
we're back.
Welcome to Post Hunt Clarity.
Boy, do we
Today
have
we're going
some
to be recapping
fucking
the
clarity.
2024 election
That went
and why
better than
you
my
should
last
have
hunt.
voted for Kamala.
She needed your help, guys. You guys failed
Yeah.
her.
Yeah, you guys didn't show up in supportive numbers for Camel Toe.
Yeah. Yeah, we haven't podcasted since the election, have we?
No, we haven't podcasted since we were both about to go on trips.
Yeah,
So,
well, we both went on said trips, and I think our results ended up being the same. We just had completely different experiences. So I'm gonna let you lead off and tell us about your recap of you left Kentucky, you came back to your home state, and had an experience, it sounded like.
yeah, I mean, it was a great trip, and I appreciate you letting me go first. That's awful nice of you.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so when we recorded our last podcast, it was Halloween. I was actually driving up, um, and kind of had a mixed trip planned, like a little bit of work, a little bit of hunting, a little more hunting than work. But basically, got there Thursday night, had to work Friday. My boss was nice enough to let me out a little while early Friday, which was not planned. So my uncle's got 60 acres behind his house that I was able to hunt that night. Well, him and my dad and my grandpa hunted the main piece. We were hunting all week. So I got to do just like if you want to call it an observation sit, yeah, but more just like a recon, like, hey, what am I seeing here versus what they're seeing there? Because if we need to send some guys up here throughout the week, we can. Um, Saw some deer, nothing worth talking about. Met up with everybody later that night, and then Saturday was like, go time. Um, and it was on fire. Like right away Saturday morning, so that would have been the second. Um, I mean, I had deer. It was one of those mornings where it was like not full moon, but like gray light for a long time. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so I got in the stand, and the stand has like that I was sitting in has really good access. So you can come up like the backside of this food plot, up a berm, and straight into the stand. So like really, if there's deer out in the field, you can get in pretty clean. And like from the moment I got in the stand and got my stuff set, I pulled my binoculars up, and there was just enough light I could see, and I had deer out in front of me. And small bucks cruising, does coming out to eat still. Like it was just that perfect. Like I'm like, okay, this is gonna be a good week. Um, Saw a good 3.5-year-old the first morning, and then a giant stepped out and kind of ran him off. But I mean, this was 150 yards for me, so just a really like good first true sit to kind of get you fired up for the week. Um, Saturday night, similar experience. Saw a lot of deer, bucks chasing right away. Couple 2.5-year-olds, a 3.5-year-old, and then another shooter that again was just 100 yards down the ridge for me, just never came into range. Um, so we were all talking Saturday, like everybody's pretty fired up because everybody saw deer. Like my uncle had like 3 bucks snort wheeze at him Saturday morning. Like it was not at him, but out in the field he was hunting. Like it was just the rut was on. You know what I mean? Um, so Sunday morning we wake up, we're all fired up to hunt, and it's pouring, like just downpour. Which like not the end of the world if we were on like a week long like just hunting trip, but that was like one of the days I had carved out that I knew I didn't have to work. Um, and it rained all freaking day. Like
Just a soaker.
yeah, and it's like one of those where like I'll go sit when it's light rain or like misting or whatever. And I've had some good sits doing that, but when it's like a soaker, it's just like to me it's just not worth the risk. Say that the deer are moving, like regardless of deer movement, say that the biggest buck I've ever seen in my life steps out in front of me and I shoot it. Well, like my chances of finding that deer are so much smaller, I feel like. Even with drones nowadays and stuff like that, like
Mhm.
my first option is always the blood trail if it's available. So we decided not to hunt. Um Monday I had to work, and Tuesday I was supposed to have all day off. Um, which would have been perfect. Like after 2 days of Monday, it kind of rained on and off. Like after 2 days of rain, like I just had a feeling like it was going to be on fire. Well, it rained all morning Tuesday, so I switched my off days. Worked Tuesday morning, took the afternoon off, and again saw some good deer. Saw the same 3.5-year-old I had seen a couple times. Like good activity. You could tell the next morning was going to be hot because it was still one of those where it was kind of misting all afternoon and just like kind of shitty weather still.
Yep.
So Wednesday, got up, got in the stand, um, and there was just that feeling, you know what I mean? Like it's the 6th of November, like it's peak now, 6th, 7th, 8th, those are kind of like the peak days, I feel like, that everybody wants to hunt. The 7th especially, but, got in my stand right away again, first light, big buck raking a tree right out, 100 yards in front of me, a shooter.
Sure.
So grunt at him, nothing. Then I don't remember exactly. This has been 2 weeks now almost, but a couple other bucks came through. I mean, I saw 4 good bucks before 7 o'clock, and shooting light was like 6:20.
Sure.
And so all of a sudden it's like 6:50 probably, and a buck pops out from right behind me and walks up, right next to me, chip shot, 20 yards. And I'm like, oh, I turn, leaves are all wet, so you can't hear that well, and all this. It's one of those where he's just there all of a sudden. I'm like, shit,
Yeah.
good buck, like shooter, not like right on the fence. And I mean, he's a buck I would have shot anywhere else, no questions asked. But I just decided, I'm like, you know what? I came up here, I really wanted to shoot something 150 plus. Like, he's a big 8, but I think he needs tough
Mhm.
one to let walk, but I think he needs a year. So watched him make a scrape, walk off. And it's like, it's one of those where it's like, it's kind of nice to be at that point in hunting where you've killed some nice deer now and you can
Yeah, you
let
can
one of
do
those
that.
deer
Yeah.
walk and you don't necessarily feel too bad about it, you know? And so I texted a picture of him to like our family group chat of everybody that was hunting, and they're like, oh yeah, nice buck, whatever. And I hear a couple leaves rustle, and I turn, and I'm like, oh shit, that's a no doubt shooter, and he's standing there at 25 yards. So I wait, he steps up behind a tree, and this buck I passed is still like probably 80 yards up the ridge from me. So he's watching this, he's locked on this other buck. So his head's behind a tree. There's a tree between me and his head. So I stand up, get my bow, turn, um, draw, and I'm at full draw for like, felt like 10 minutes. It was realistically probably 90 seconds, but finally he comes out and kind of cuts away. And so I stopped him, shot, and like that felt like a good shot. Just one of those where you're like
Mhm.
confident in it right away. And arrow hit him, and I'm like, looked good. And he turns to run. So he's facing directly away from me now, and my arrow's hanging, I mean, 20 inches out of him,
Yeah.
maybe a little more. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, what the fuck? So immediately I'm like worried about it. And it's hard, like your mind starts playing tricks on you, and like it's
Mhm.
hard to remember exactly what happened. So did the right thing, got down, went back, sat it out for like another hour, got down, went back to camp, waited for everybody else to come in, gave it till, so shot him at like 6:55. Waited, it's like 12:30, 1 o'clock. We went out to look for him. Um, right away, there's like a pine thicket right next to this oak ridge that I was sitting on. So he ran right down into the pines, and like 10 yards into the pines, we found my arrow. Broke off, like we were able to see, I only got 7.5 inches of penetration, maybe 7, and just could not find blood. I mean, like we scoured for blood. And so we kind of just called, like we looked for an hour and kind of just called it and determined that like with how much of the arrow was sticking out of him, like, must be alive, just not lethal. Hit him in the shoulder, whatever. So I think what happened was he came in, he started quartering away from me, and as I stopped him, his head kind of whipped around to look, and I think he kind of tucked his left leg back a little bit. And
Sure.
I don't think I realized how much his scapula was pulled back, his shoulder. And so I think I shot where I wanted to. I just don't think where I needed to shoot was where I wanted to shoot necessarily. I don't think that I was aware of the situation as it happened. So got back in the stand Wednesday night, and just one of those where it's like you feel terrible about it. I mean, this was by far the biggest buck I've ever shot. Like, this buck was a stud. Um, and just like, not only that, but not knowing if the animal's dead or alive, suffering, whatever, you feel
Mhm.
terrible. So I remembered that morning I had watched him. It's like ridge, cedar thicket, another ridge. So there's kind of the cedar thicket's in kind of a valley. And I remember I shot this deer and I sat and I was all excited, and you're trying to get
Mhm.
yourself to calm down and listen. And so I pulled up my binoculars and I was glassing across the cedar thicket or the pine thicket and onto this other ridge. And I noticed a buck, a big buck. Looked like a different deer, but it was hard to tell. I'm looking through brush, and I just watched him, kind of act a little melancholy, but looked all right, kind of just meander off. So I pulled up Onyx, used the compass feature when I was back in my stand that night, looked at where I had seen that deer, ranged it, dropped a pin, and got down and walked over there, found blood. And I'm like, oh, okay. There was like a 10-yard stretch where there was, a couple little puddles of
Mhm.
blood, couple drops, and then nothing. So got my uncle's dog. He came out, or she came out, and just never really was interested. So that kind of gave me the closure that I needed. That, like, okay, this deer is still alive. Like, time to start hunting again. Um, Thursday kind of sucked because it was the 7th. Like, there was still that feeling of like it's just on fire,
Mhm.
and I had to work all day, so didn't get to hunt. And then Friday I had the full day off, so I'm like, okay, like, go time the next 2 days, like, do what I need to do to kill a deer. Friday morning, go back to the same stand. I mean, everywhere had just been on fire. It was one of those where it's like, just pick a freaking stand. Like, at this point, it's just there's deer everywhere. It's just chance of whether a buck's gonna come by your
Yeah.
stand or mine. Um, got in there and just like as I started seeing deer that morning, you could almost just feel like the lockdown. You know what I mean? Like, as
Yeah.
weird as that sounds, but it was like each morning I had seen, like, not necessarily a shooter pretty early on, but like a solid buck right pretty early on,
Mhm.
whether it was a big 2.5-year old, a 3.5-year old, whatever. And like, none of that. Bucks chasing, but all
Yeah.
smaller bucks. And that was all I really saw. Got in Friday night, went to a different spot, saw 3 deer the whole night, which, like, most people are like, okay, like, well, I've never seen 3 deer at this piece of property. Like, it's not possible. I mean, this is fucking Disneyland, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so just kind of like, I've never experienced lockdown like that. Like I was telling you, like, my best rut sits have been the 10th, the 11th, the 12th. You know what I mean?
Those are my worst
And
sits, I feel like.
yeah, and this year by the 8th, it was like full on
Mhm.
lockdown. Um, and so Saturday morning, I'm like, last day to hunt, get in the stand, sat till like, 11, had a good buck come through. Another one that was like right on the fence. Decided to pass him. I'm like, nope, I'm gonna stick to my guns here. Like, I came up here to shoot a big one. Not gonna compromise just because it's the last day. And Saturday night had another wild sit, like, just freaking deer everywhere, but no, any of the bucks that showed up were little bucks. It was just it
Mhm.
kept I'm like, all right, one's bound and determined to show up at, so like there's so many does around. Like there's got to be a buck that comes, a good buck that comes from somewhere, and it just never happened. So it sucks. I mean, had I not shot that one, I probably would have, been okay with the feeling coming home, but obviously it was a little bit bittersweet. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a great trip. It was one of the better weeks of hunting I'd had, but between not getting to hunt Sunday with how on fire it was,
Mhm.
not really getting too much Tuesday because of the weather, and then pussing one up like I did, it's just,
Busting one up. I haven't heard that phrase before.
it just sucks. But what do you do? And normally, I don't run around telling people that, like I didn't post that or anything,
Yeah.
but it is a part of hunting. It's the truth about what happened, and it sucks. I mean, I've had it happen before, and I made a vow last year that I wasn't doing it again, and I had a successful 3 kills. No real
Mhm.
issues, and this year it happened again. So
I still want to dive into that shot. Everything we're going to talk about here in the next couple minutes, though, is still theory. But for you to hit that deer in the shoulder, which, like, with the amount of penetration you got, your broke off arrow, almost 100% that deer, don't know where in the shoulder, but was in the shoulder, right?
I think it had to have been.
It
I
had
don't know
to
how
have
you get
been
that little of penetration. I mean, I'm shooting a 70
with the
pound
fixed
bow,
head. Yeah.
475 grain arrow with a fixed head. Like now I'm
No,
shooting
you
slick tricks. I'm not shooting single bevel broadheads that are meant to go through bone necessarily, but
it you would still, so that's what I'm saying. Like if you hit it anywhere behind the shoulder through the ribs, you're getting a pass through.
yeah.
So you definitely hit it in the shoulder, dude. You had to have hit it high. Like I wonder if the only other factor you didn't realize is maybe when you stopped it that he must have ducked just a little bit too. Because with my buck, so I didn't know this, but the buck I shot November 1st in Wisconsin, I shot it was at 30 yards. I had my 20-yard pin. And when I watched that arrow hit, like it was low. And I'm like, oh, like I went through the heart, but it was low, 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 low. When I watch the footage, because that's the only advantage I have is where when I'm hunting, 99.9% of the time I got the kill shot on camera. So I can always go back and watch it, right? So frame by frame, and we're talking 24 frames per second. That's 24 individual pictures per second. So I can go frame by frame and see where my arrow's at. The last 2 feet of arrow travel, you can see that deer's back drop. Like he dumped 6 inches from like, and if you look at where my arrow impacted, and then you hold your finger at that spot and you back up the frame to when I shot, if he wouldn't have dropped, I'd have missed that deer.
Yeah.
He
And I
ducked
think
into the arrow, and I didn't try to do that, but just theoretically, that's why I'm wondering. Like at the distance, you're saying 25-ish yards for this buck. Like there's a
he
chance
was
last
30
second
when I
he.
shot. He
So
was he
I
was
mean,
28, 30, somewhere in there.
even 3 inches though. If he ducks, if he's on the way down a little bit, 3 inches is the difference between shoulder dead zone. You're above the lungs, below the spine, and that's 80% of deer that get lost. Are in that area, but good chance that your uncle probably could get a you know trail cam photo of him or whatever.
Well, and that's what I think happened. Truth, like I think I shot him a little further forward than what was ideal because of what I talked about with him
His leg
hitting.
being back up.
If you think about it, if a deer, it's going to be hard for our viewers to shape, but to see that, or to picture this maybe because they can't see this, but deer comes in this way, right? You're here, he's quartering away from you. All of a sudden, his head curls up like this. Think of how much more scrunched up his body. His
Yeah,
head turns
just
back to look
weird
at you. Now
angle.
his body's all crunched up in a weird spot. So I think I just shot him a little further forward than what I wanted to, and that's one of the disadvantages to me not filming. I think it's very possible he ducked 3 to 5 inches between the time I shot and the time the arrow hit him.
For sure.
But it's hard to see with the naked eye, especially when you're trying to
No, and that's
watch
what I'm
where your
saying.
arrow goes.
Because like I would have had no idea if I never filmed my kill shot. I'd have think I just had a perfect heart shot. When in reality, my shot was low, because I aimed low. I used the wrong pin for that. I was 10 yards off. Like the whole thing about my story just makes sense, but it was by the luck of the draw that, in 30 yards that deer jumped the string, like, almost every whitetail will at that distance. But, the guess thing here is that you never know how much, or even if a deer reacts. Like there's people that aim low anticipating a duck and they never get the duck. And then there's people that just aim normal and then the deer ducks. And next thing you know, that's why that I said it, 9 times out of 10 when somebody messes up, let's just use that phrase, messes up on a deer when they're shooting archery, it's high in the shoulder because they always duck. They always duck and turn away. That's how it is. So the shoulder gets brought back even further at that point because it's turning away and it's also dropping, which high is never good. But put I think I've shot 4 deer in my life where my arrow's within 2 inches one way or the other of the spot we're talking about right now, and it sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely does, but it's a good learning experience, like we talked about too. It's like this buck came from behind me and popped out, and when I shot him, he would have been about in line with me, I guess. And
Yep.
it's like, did you take the shot you needed to take too? Like I said, he was kind of starting to cut away from me, but there's also another trail that he was about to get to that would have looped back around right in front of me. And it's like, I was always taught you take the shot you have, but at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, there's some reflection in that of would he have given me a better shot? He
Sure.
might have popped down to that other trail, came right in front of my stand at 20 yards broadside, you know, where I probably wouldn't have had to stop him.
Sure. Yeah, that's just one of those things where it's all theory from there. You'll never know, and I think that's okay. You take everything with a grain of salt. You're not the only person on this, listening to this podcast that's shoulder shot a deer. I've shoulder shot a few of them, and as much as I hate to say it, it's probably not going to be the last time. I mean, I guarantee
Yeah.
at some point in the next 40 years of me hunting, what are the odds I never shoot another deer in the shoulder? Probably slim, right? It's just things happen. There's so
Yeah.
much in that second to second and a half, or however it might be less than that it takes your arrow to leave your rest to hit a deer. So much can happen. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Well, and there's some equipment stuff I want to review a little bit next year too. 30 yards
Yeah.
is a I don't want to say a poke because the shot's not necessarily far, but from a kinetic energy standpoint, maybe a little. But like, I want to review my arrow weight. I'd like to go to a single bevel broadhead. I think at this point, like, that's the second time I've done that. The first time was with like a 2.5-year-old when I was 17, but it's just like not a fun feeling. And
No.
then the next year you shoot, you get a little scared and you punch it a little further back than you probably need to, and it just creates problems. So yeah, like I said, there's some interesting stuff, and it's the arrow drop thing is hard because the buck I shot 2 years ago that I never found, um, I stopped that buck twice. Like
Mhm.
I literally, he came out quartering across a long and narrow food plot. Um, I mean, this food plot's 15 yards wide, and came barreling in. I didn't see him till he was almost in the food plot, so I got my bow up, had to get him stopped before I was even at full draw. He started walking again, stopped him again. Intentionally, I don't want to say intentionally aimed a little low, but shot him a little low. Intentionally made sure to not hold high per se.
Yep.
And he never dropped. And I hit him in the brisket and never found him.
Yeah,
Like
I would have
had he
that
had
my
he
arrow would have went
dropped,
right to the brisket if my deer didn't drop the other day.
yeah, had he have dropped 2 to 3 inches, like dead deer, you
Yeah,
know.
you're center punching the heart.
Yeah, I mean he's smoked, but unfortunately that's just not the way it always happens. So, anyways, enough about me. How was
No, 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 we're
Kansas?
not we're not we're not done yet because you left
Oh,
Wisconsin back
yeah.
to the great state of Kentucky. So what happened there?
So it was one of those leaving. Like I said, I was bummed out, but I was like, maybe this will be one of those where it's like I leave and I'm kind of bummed, and right away Saturday, I get on a buck and kill it. I'm like maybe that'll happen. So all week, you were in Kansas, so I'm kind of talking to you. Hi, Ellie. I got you
Oh
your
no.
L8. Oh, she can't hear me, can
She
she?
can't hear you because you're plugged into the.
Are you guys
Tell her I got.
recording?
He's got L8 for you. He said.
I got you.
All right.
Kentucky shit.
Are you recording right now?
Yes, we're in the middle of a podcast.
Oh, hi podcast.
Sorry,
Say hi to
podcasters.
Ellie,
That's my
everybody.
wife. She just got home. Say hi.
I hope nobody heard my conversation with my dad. Because that's some pretty nasty shit said, but okay. Bye.
Bye.
I didn't even see her. I heard you and I was like, wait, what?
Oh.
So anyways.
But anyways, we were talking about, like, you were in Kansas, so I was talking with you a lot about what you were seeing, trying to kind of help you talk through some of your thoughts that were going on, and hadn't really thought too much about where I was going to sit that weekend until midweek. And then all of a sudden I'm like, shit, I got a lot of places I could go and not a strong pull towards any one of them. And all of a sudden Thursday rolled around and I got a picture of a buck that for sure will go boon. Yeah, we'll go boon next year. He's probably a mid 150s right now. So I'm like, all right.
Yeah, but yeah.
Easy to, yeah, probably. I mean, he's a booner
That's a
next
12
year, I think. I'm like, all right, well, that made my decision easy. So I'm like, perfect. It's that time of the year. I've got a fresh tarsal gland at my disposal. My uncle ended up killing a buck while we were up there, a really solid buck. So he gave me the tarsal gland off that. I'm like, I'm gonna use that, slip in. It's wet, so I can get in quiet. Like, this will be perfect. Set up, get in early, feel like I get in clean. Sit. I mean, shooting light's 6:50. I'm set up by like 6:35. And 7 o'clock rolls around, nothing. 8 o'clock, nothing. 9 o'clock, nothing. 10 o'clock, nothing. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what is going on? 11 o'clock rolls around, get down, leave. Couldn't hunt Saturday night. Had some friend stuff going on. So got up Saturday or Sunday. And I'm like, all right, going to a different piece. Like, I had a spot I was confident in, slip in. Probably the cleanest I've got in on like a pack in hunt this year.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, I'm set in the tree. It's like 15, 20 minutes before shooting light. And I see a light come walking down the trail. I wasn't too far, like, I was a ways from the parking lot, but not like an unreasonable distance. I was the only truck in the lot when I got there. And I hadn't really ran into any other bow hunters on this piece this year. Kind of just thought I was going to be the only one. So this guy's fucking around in one spot, then he leaves that, then he gets down to the creek kind of by me, and he starts walking the other way, then he comes back, then I see his light kind of in the same area for like 3 minutes, then he kicks it off. So I'm assuming he's set up, I don't know, 125 yards from me, whatever. Like, as long as he's quiet once he's in the tree, it's probably fine. And so again, I'm sitting, nothing. And I packed in with the intentions of, like, I brought lunch. Like, I'm going to sit till 11 o'clock. Hero. Yeah, I'm going to sit till 11 o'clock, get down. I've got 2 trail cameras I've got to pull, and then I'm going to switch trees if I need to and be in the tree the rest of the day. So it's like 9 o'clock, all of a sudden I hear boom. And so I turn around, and there's a guy in all blaze orange, like, down, and he was right on the property line. And it's gun season in Kentucky, but you can't gun hunt this WMA. So I'm like, maybe he might be on, like, he kind of looked like he was on the private. So I'm like, somebody must have just went out behind their house this morning and dumped a doe or something. So finally, like, 10 o'clock rolls around, and I haven't seen shit again, and I'm exhausted, and I'm just like, fuck this, I'm getting down, I'm going home, I'm not hunting tonight. So get down, pull my trail cameras, get back to the parking lot, run into this guy, squirrel hunter, just rooting around in the woods on November 17th, like, And so, yeah, just really thought that, like, well, my Wisconsin trip didn't end with a tag punch. Maybe Kentucky will. So I don't know. Skipped Sunday night, hung out with the girlfriend, lounged, kind of feel rejuvenated after that, and I'm excited to hunt again this weekend. And I've got a gun hunt in 2 weeks from Saturday, so December 7th and 8th down here, a quota hunt that I'm actually kind of excited for again now. So I don't know, I've never been to this piece of public. I literally picked a spot on a map. I'll probably get Gabe's final thoughts on it, but I'm fairly confident. I've got 2 spots I'm fairly confident in. I just got to narrow it down between the 2. Probably just pack in and sit on the ground for the day, honestly. Set my tripod up and just let her rip. So
solid November.
Yeah, I don't know. That's where I'm at. I'm determined to get a tag punched this year. So back to Wisconsin for me tomorrow and gun season.
I was determined to fill 4 out of 4 tags, and it's looking like I got 1 out of 4 tags filled, which is still a shitty percentage. Yeah, I shot a Wisconsin buck. I don't necessarily have like hunter's regret, right? Like, I was happy with the deer. I'm glad I shot a deer. I'm glad I filled my tag, but god damn it, it would have been nice to shoot a bigger deer. But that's always the case.
It's one of those hard things. Like when you shot it, I think we were both excited, which I don't know if we've talked about that on the podcast. I don't think we have. You might want to tell that story.
Oh, yeah. Because I killed a buck. Yeah, the last podcast we had was Halloween, and I literally was telling you, I was like, I'm going to kill a buck tomorrow. I'm going hunting tomorrow. I'm going to kill a buck. Well, ha ha ha. Just broke the news. YouTube videos out there. Go watch it.
Yeah.
I killed the buck that next morning after Ben and I podcasted in the spot I was going to. The hunt didn't pan out the way I thought it would. This is Wisconsin. Went to some public. First person there. Got ready. Got bubble guts, had to go take a shit in the woods. Took a shit in the woods, came back to the truck, and another truck pulled up. And I was ready to walk in the woods, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to talk to this guy because I'm going to be 10 minutes ahead of him. And the last thing I want is somebody with a headlamp to, walk under my tree and, start talking while I'm, like 2 or 3 rails up trying to hang my set. So I get out there, and it's a 40s male, like dad's age type deal, maybe younger than my dad. And I'm like, hey, obviously I see you're hunting. And he pulls out a crossbow. And I'm like, just to let you know, I plan on going down at the end of the property. There's a water hole, and I'm just going to pack in and go. He's like, no, I'm going down there. I'm like, well, I got here first, so I was just, I just wanted to ask if we weren't going to the same spot, but that's where I was going to go. And he's like, no, I got a ladder stand back there. I don't have any other stands on the property. I'm like, you have nowhere else. Like, there's nowhere else you could go hunt on this property. You really want to go there? And he's like, yeah, I think you need to find a different spot to go hunt. And I'm like, okay, like, fuck this guy, right? Like, I was there first, like, and it's just courteous, right? Somebody beats you out of bed, you just take it and take the L. So what did I do? I'm packing in blind to a spot that I've never, like, it's on the same property, but never hunted there. And I haven't walked it since it was full of foliage, green leaves. So I'd pack it in the dark, shining my white ass headlamp up in the trees, trying to be like, okay, that one I think I could shoot out of, that one, that situation. I crawled up a tree. Moral of the story, I sat for about 2 hours. I rattled in 2 bucks, shot the biggest of the 2, watched that buck fall over, ran 80 yards towards the truck. Awesome story. Just a small buck, about a 100-inch deer. I was jacked up about it. Hadn't filled the Wisconsin buck tag with my bow since like 2016. So I ended the streak, right? Almost, not quite, but almost a freaking decade, dude, in my home state. Minus the 3 years I lived in Missouri, but still, like, a decade in your home state, 8 years in your home state without punching a tag. That's freaking wild. So I did it. But I also didn't have, like, between the trail cameras I had out there, like, I'm not getting pictures of many deer. So I'm going to shoot whatever gets me jazzed up. Fast forward now, I'm sitting in Kansas, and my trail cameras are lighting up daytime pictures of big buck after big buck after big buck. So I'm sitting there like, shoulda, coulda, woulda at that point. Like, I guess it is what it is. But what I'm more mad about, because I'll jump forward here, is I ended up burning this Kansas tag, right? So I burned North Dakota. That trip sucked. My Kansas trip, I'll get into that, but burn that tag. And I'm like, my season's done, right? I'm coming home. I don't have a Wisconsin tag. I don't have any time to go anywhere else to try and, I'm not going back to Kansas, not going back to North Dakota. I will not go back to Minnesota. So I'm like, my season's done. Gun season's it. I don't care to gun hunting that much. So anyways, November 8th, it's a Friday. I worked till noon, 1 o'clock. I met Dad at his house in Stanley. We started heading towards Kansas. First time ever. I drew central units, north central Kansas, pretty much smack dab in the state. Just places I'd e-scouted, plans to hunt public. Got to northwest Missouri by like 9 o'clock. Stayed at a friend's house, a partner's house, and then Dad and I woke up early the next day. Went to Kansas. They just got like 4 inches of rain the past week, and the roads out there, they're not gravel, they're not sand, they're dirt. So when you get 4 inches of rain, it was mud. Like I'd have had better luck putting on ice skates and like trying to walk across sheer ice than we had driving. Like it was just insane. But anyways, I marked some public pieces on the very east side of the first unit that I drew, and I'm like, let's just go glass scout walk, see if we can see deer chasing. It's the 9th of November now. It should be game on down here. And pull up to the first public spot, and there's 2 trucks parked there. I'm like, okay, we're not going to scout this spot. Go to the next spot. There's pheasant hunters hopping out of a vehicle, like 6 of them and 2 dogs. I'm like, okay, we'll go to the next spot. Pass a game warden that was driving. I'm like, we knew it was game warden because you could just tell by the truck. Wave to him. He basically watched me almost crash my dad's truck into the side of a hill from sliding through the mud. Get to another public piece. Nobody there, so Dad and I park. We get out, and our plan is just to blow up this piece and walk it. It's a giant ag field with a one draw going on the very west side of the property, runs north to south. Not a big draw, and we walk it, and I think we kicked up a single doe that looked very young, and there was some old buck sign, like old scrapes that hadn't been touched since the rain, rubs that were old, probably from velvet, but like 2 sets, maybe 3 since the rain, of deer. Just so we rode off the property like there's no deer sign here. We ain't hunting it, which was good. We needed to know that. Got back to the truck. Game warden was sitting there waiting for me. Real nice guy. His name was Coulter, I believe. He gave me his business card, and we're talking to him. I'm telling him who I am. Like, yeah, I work in the hunting industry, like brand manager for this company, and he's like, I use your tree stands. Like, I love them, dude. I'm like, oh, here, I'll give you a discount. Hit me up. So, real nice guy. He was giving me some tips on where to go. As I'm like, there's this reservoir here, and fuck it, I'm just gonna name them. There's Marion Reservoir in Unit 6 or Canopolis Reservoir in Unit 4. And I'm like, I got waypoints at both. I was leaning towards Marion. I know Canopolis is further northwest, but I don't know. And he's like, go to Canopolis. He's like, you want to see deer, it's the place to go. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna trust this guy. And boy, was he wrong. unless he knew something that I didn't, dude. I would recommend not going to that spot from an outside perspective. So basically, we get up there, we set up camp. We're camping at one of the public campgrounds they had there. So Dad and I, Saturday night, what the dilemma was is originally, while I was still full-time employed with benefits, I'd taken off 2 whole weeks. It was supposed to be me 15 days in Kansas. And that should have been plenty of time. Well, since now self-employed doing contract work, I can't take off 2 weeks because I got people that need stuff done. I'm at bat for everything, so I can justify 7 total days. That's all I got to do this. Never stepped foot in this state to hunt before. So I'd done so much e-scouting. I got permission from a landowner to access public through his property. I wrote him a letter. So I'm like, we're going to do that first thing. So we drive all the way over there, park the truck, access the public through his land, and we're walking in, and I'm like, there's not a single deer track. And I'm like, I got a waypoint. This is where I want to go, half-mile walk or so. We ended up hunting right next to the waypoint because that's what I wanted to do, but no deer sign. Like, not a single rub, not a single scrape, nothing. We get set up 8 feet in the tree. Like, I was Snapchatting you because I'd set up and I'm like, yeah, we're going to see a deer. I look up and there's a spike at like 10 yards. Never heard it. Just boom, right there. So the spike came out and it was at like 320. And then 2 does behind us.
The amount of deer, like Kansas is like the #1 state in the country, probably where you can see deer from a freaking mile away. And the amount of deer that I've had just appear at like 10 or 15 yards in that state is unbelievable. It's like, where the hell do they come from?
Just
Like,
show up. Yep.
yeah, I don't get it. So anyways, not to cut you off, but that's happened to me there too.
And I'm hunting like on the red, like it's a big chunk of woods. Like I can't see more than 100 yards. I mean, I'm in the woods, and there's a little field behind me that wasn't planted. It was just more grass. Two does came out to feed. It got dark. Never saw anything. The rest, 3 deer, whatever. So the next morning, I had another waypoint on some Weehaw, which is the walk-in piece, like further west, almost as far west in this unit as I can go. And I'm like, it's gonna be an hour drive from camp. Dad, let's do it. It looks great. Just big property. We went in, packed in blind, got set up. We're like ended up sitting up next to a ladder stand that was basically on the waypoint. So it must have been a good spot, right? Sat till 10 o'clock or so. I don't know. It was like 3-4 hours in the stand. Pheasant hunters came up, blew up the entire property. We never saw a deer, so I'm like, all right, let's speed scout it. Let's just like blow this property up just to check for buck sign, deer sign. Walk the whole property, cut one set of tracks. And I'm like, that's not what I was hoping for. Like, I don't understand how there's not deer here. Everything looks great. Like everything you're looking for. You like not a whole lot of food, but like you have some food. You have the creek bottom. You have the woods. You got like the terrain that I thought would be ideal. One deer track. So we're like, all right, well, let's spend the rest of the day. And I knew I should have probably done this Saturday and Sunday instead of hunting right away, but I was excited. So I basically wasted 2 sits when I should have been, let's just not plan on hunting until Monday or Sunday night and just walk scout so I can get a property, a B property, and a C property that I know like, okay, there's deer here, there was deer here, there's deer sign, and do that. So Sunday morning, late, like 11 a.m., that's our plan for the rest of the days. We're going to go put on however many miles we can and then drive around the public ag fields the last hour and see what we can see on these fields. See if there's chasing, see where hunters are, blah, blah, blah. So Dad and I walked, I think, like 9 miles that day, just checking off pieces, which was beneficial because we found a lot of buck sign. We found some properties that, like, there's rubs and scrapes everywhere, like fresh rubs, scrapes that had just been opened post rain, which was within the last 24 hours, scrapes that hadn't been, that had been rained on. So we're like, okay, not as fresh, but there's been deer moving through this area. And the nice thing about the rain too at the start of our trip is that you can 100% know what tracks are fresh and which tracks are not. And this property, some deer tracks, but you're talking like, okay, there was 3 deer, whatever they were here. There was 1 deer that just like, I'm thinking I'm going to see tracks of like 15 to 30 deer on these, like just herds of deer, right? That's what I thought Kansas was. And no, I'm like, there's, yes, a couple of deer, but not like, man, this is not a lot of deer sign. It threw me for a loop. Like there's buck sign, but not a lot of overall deer sign. And that was the case with every property, every piece of that public at Canopolis Reservoir we went to was just all the same. There was buck sign, whether there was bucks here late October, early November. Like at one point, yes, there were bucks here and they were marking their territory, but as of now, like there's no deer. So we did our walks. Then that evening, we're like, okay, let's go glass. And I wanted to glass stuff on the north side of the lake. The problem was it took 35 minutes just to get around the lake. And we're like, you know what? Let's just stay to this side of the lake, which was a mistake. And drove around. There was a truck at every single parking lot, at least 1, if not 2 vehicles. So it was getting hunted. And these are whitetail hunters. This isn't not even including the pheasant vehicles with all the dog kennels and stuff in the back. These are just deer hunters that I'm paying attention to. So every piece had been hunted, and we drove around, and I saw a couple spikes in the field. We really didn't see shit for does out. Like there just wasn't deer out in these fields, and I'm so confused by it. So on the way back to camp, like we have to go through a 5-mile stretch where it's all private. You're no longer near, public. You're 2-3 miles south of Public, and we get into the 150s, on these open country hillsides chasing does. There's like 6 does, and this buck is chasing, and all of a sudden you look across the road, and this buck flies in front of the truck, and he's running over them. I'm like, okay, the rut's on. Like, there's deer. We need to find, a place that we can hunt that the deer exist. Well,
Right.
the entire week was just a struggle to do that. And we went and we sat spot after spot. I didn't really commit to, like, in hindsight, I think to be successful there, it might sound a little boring, but if you picked one spot, there was buck sign and just a little bit of deer sign, and you didn't move and you sat it for 7 days in a row, I think you'd have an opportunity to shoot a decent deer for sure. I don't think you would get skunked. You would have a couple sits where you got skunked, but I think if you stayed at it, you would shoot a deer. And that's not what I did. So we sat a spot, didn't see anything, and I'm like, well, that sucks. It looked good. Then Monday morning, we had sat a spot. Actually, I need to backtrack. Monday morning, I went and sat at the spot we'd walked. Saw a doe right away that came within like 60 yards of us. Watched her fly across the field at some point. Then there was another deer that was way off, and then all of a sudden I turned around and there was a buck at like 60 yards across the river that I think had either smelled or seen us before I even knew it was there. He peeled off, so that sit was a bust. Monday night, didn't see shit. Then Tuesday, I'm like, all right, let's pack in and find some green fields to hunt, because it seemed like the property we were just at didn't have any fresh food. All the fields were cut. It was just empty. And went in blind. I don't even remember what day of the week like I actually saw a deer. I can't even remember. But at some point in the trip, earlier before the middle part of the trip, I looked at Onyx and the recent imagery, and I'm like, these are green fields. Hopefully they're alfalfa and not just ryegrass, because we had went and sat a ryegrass field. I believe it was either Monday or Tuesday night, one of the 2 evenings, where again we had access to that private piece I got access to. And I get up in the tree, and one of my, like, I won't name names, but like one of the people I work with in the hunting industry that's like a food plot guru posted a picture, and it was like food plot with ryegrass and food plot without ryegrass. And the whole post was him saying that deer don't eat ryegrass, deer hate ryegrass, and ryegrass is invasive, so don't plant it in your food plots. And I'm like, really? I just crawled up in the spot because I was surrounded by a ryegrass field, because I don't know what the fuck these deer are eating out here. There's not that much food. It's a green field. They should be eating it. We got skunked that night. Never saw a fucking thing. So I'm like, all right, done with ryegrass. Look at Onyx recent imagery. Okay, I see green fields hidden along a big river, the Smoky River, whatever it's called. Let's go hunt. So we walk 0.8 miles back there. Like, it's hard to find a tree in Kansas to hunt that's suitable for not just one hang-on tree stand, but I'm trying to double sit with my dad. So it made it, we couldn't sit where I wanted to sit. We had to hunt where we could sit. So we finally found a tree, pack in, we get in, it's still dark. Hear buck and doe start chasing out through they cross the river. All you hear is, they fly across the field at like 40, 50 yards, but it's dark out. I'm like, okay, this is going to be a good morning. As soon as it cracked light, all of a sudden, like, the rut was there. Freaking doe flies across the field, 3 bucks chasing behind her, just freaking buck with the doe here, bucks running. Like I think we saw 15 deer all before 7 a.m. And like you couldn't see until like 6:40-ish. Like that first 20 minutes was like, we're gonna have like, this is the spot. Like, there's deer here. This is the spot. 10 a.m. The only what I would consider shooter, I think it was a 3-year-old 10. All the other bucks were just kind of mid, probably 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds that may have not scored well. But the 10 chased a doe across the field. I'm like, all these deer we watched this morning ran or came out of there. So tonight, Dad, we're going there. So that's what we did. We got down and we're like, okay, we're gonna go sit there. Found the most unideal tree possible, just a giant tree. Rails are, the light rails aren't straight on a tree like you'd like them. Like, I have to put them sideways on a tree and sideways, so you're stepping and climbing weird. My dad, of course, he doesn't wear a safety harness, so I'm like, I'm freaking out because this guy's gonna die out here. And just like, anyway, so we sit in that tree that night, and not a fucking deer. Not a single deer. And 20 minutes before shooting light, we had somebody driving a UTV that drove by us at like 15 yards. Then they parked and were fucking around where, I was hoping the deer were going to come from. And he drives by, waves at us, then like starts whipping shitties in the field. It's just like hunter harassment. It's just being a douchebag. I'm like, oh, that's nice. So we left our stands in the tree, and I'm like, well, we'll hunt it tomorrow morning. Nobody should be out ripping on the 4-wheeler tomorrow morning. And it starts cracking light. I'm like, okay, they're going to start flying around. It's going to be chase on. Like, it's game time. Nothing. Empty. Not a deer. 10 o'clock, it starts getting windy. We got 35-mile-an-hour winds, and you can't hear anything. I look up, all of a sudden, boom, there's a doe, and then a buck came through at like 40, 50, 60 yards, whatever it was. Can't shoot because it was thick in there. And they ended up bedding next to us. And Dad and I got down, used the wind cover, walked further around the field. We ended up skirting these deer, came back to that set that night. Doe, spike buck. We didn't see the 10-pointer that was there this morning. And just super confused. So we're like, we'll give it one more morning, because we had seen deer here. Out of all the other spots where we haven't seen deer, like this property has the best deer sign. And sat the next morning, didn't see a fucking thing. So I'm like, all right, I'm mad, I'm frustrated, my trip's half over, and I'm still at square one. Don't know where to go. And that was kind of the story of the rest of the trip. Like, I think after we got down, we went and kind of blew up 2 more properties, and I'm like, there's a lot of buck sign on this property, but again, like, not a bunch of tracks. Just like a buck had gone through here at some point, raked up a bunch of scrapes and rubs, but like, they're not living here. And that spot was a good pinch point where we're like, it's a draw that runs north to south, like 3-4 miles. It's 100 yards wide at its widest point, and most of the draw pinches down to like 30-40 yards wide. So if there's going to be a buck cruising and you sit here all day, there should at least be one deer that runs by this spot. So we go in there and sit. 10 o'clock, I look down and I see a deer dive into the creek bottom and cross onto the opposite side of us. And I'm like, throw up the binocs. I look at Dad. I'm like, shooter, like good buck. So he starts trying to film. I won't go into the details. All of it's blurry. He never got actual good footage of this buck. So he was mad. I was mad. This deer comes in. I'm like, knowing right away after I looked on Onyx, I had fucked up where I sat. I sat on the very east side of this draw, which was the narrowest point of woods to field. That buck had crossed over to the bigger chunk of woods. And it makes sense the way the terrain is. I won't get into details, but like, I know right away, I'm like, this deer's not going to come into shooting range. And he was, paralleling me at 50 yards. I grunt, stop him. He's looking. He stood there for like 2 minutes. But it's open on the forest the forest floor, like on the ground. It's open. He can see. There's no deer obviously there. He's like, I heard grunting, but there's no deer. So there's no way for me to fool him because I didn't bring the decoys. 30-mile-an-hour winds with a 2D decoy, you might as well fucking hold on to a goddamn kite. Those things were so dumb. It was dumb, dude. Like, we had decoys out in that hayfield, and they ended up spooking deer because they were just blowing around and like just dumb. So anyways, this deer kind of trots off. I rattle like desperation. I had already doe bleeded. I grunted. He had stopped multiple times and looked, but not committed to coming in. He runs out to the field. I'm like, it's over. So I grab the antlers. I start smashing them together, and he freaking 180 flies in. I'm like, okay, this is it. Like, he's coming in hot. Gets to the same fucking spot at 50 yards and stops. And just looks. Doesn't see anything and just starts cruising back down the creek. And I'm like, well, for 145 or 150-inch 10, like, that was my chance. Maybe he'll come back. So guess what, Dad? We're now sitting all day. So we ended up actually, like, we literally just got down, crossed the draw, went to a tree that I would have killed that deer out of, and sat up again. So this took 30 minutes. Sat the rest of the day, never saw a fucking deer. It's just like, so we left the stands in the tree because I'm like, maybe it'll happen again tomorrow. Like, if bucks are cruising, which I think majority of the trip they were probably in lockdown or whatever, but this buck was searching for a doe. Maybe it'll happen tomorrow. Sat until noon, never saw a deer, and like at this point I'm furious. Like, I don't know what to do, don't know where to go, and blah blah blah. I won't drag it on. That was the story of the entire trip, is the fact that I could find buck sign, I could not find deer sign. Don't know how to make it make sense, but in theory, at that point in the rut, you're talking November 15th, 16th, 17th, 8th, like, the bucks are no longer just like, they are where the does are. Because at that point in the rut, like, you're finding what's left. And if there's not that much deer there in general, like, you need to find the does. And that's why we were like, okay, like, where the hell are the does? So you and I talked, and I'm like, here's the spot, the very, south side of this draw. You got standing corn, you got cut corn, you got standing milo, cut milo, you got a standing bean field that's dried up, you have alfalfa fields, like all the food they could want. And you and I talked, and you were like, go sit the bean field. I'm like, yeah, I should go sit the corn field. Then we talked some more. I'm like, you know what? Let's go sit the alfalfa field. Walk all the way back there, go sit the alfalfa field. Saw a stud of a buck just following a doe at 150 yards away on the other side of the river, in like a spot that there should have never been a fucking deer in the first place. But they were over there, and I'm like, well, that sucks. We didn't see anything else. So the next day, I mean, Dad and I we walked the edge of the milo field. We walked the standing corn field. We walked in the woods. We went over to the bean field that was standing. And same thing. Like, if you had that in Wisconsin, when you would walk the field edge, you would see rubs, you'd see scrapes, you would see like runways coming out of the woods to these fields. Didn't exist. The bean field, like 2 sets of tracks. The cornfield, like even worse. Like there was like a 100-yard stretch in the cornfield. There wasn't a deer track. And I'm like, to me, it doesn't make sense. Like, the only thing collectively I could figure out is that, yes, there is a deer, or there are a couple deer here and there, but like, there's just not the population in this area. And it kind of sucks, but I learned the hard way. I still think you could shoot a deer there. It's probably a respectable buck. And there's factors I don't know that may have played a factor. Like, example, we showed up on November 9th. And there was trucks all over every parking lot. The rest of the week, like, we were unbothered. Like people didn't exist. There was nobody else whitetail hunting during the week. But how much pressure the prior 3 weeks from guys in October, early November on that public, like, did it get raped and pillaged? Probably. Like, these deer, I think, vacate the public, and they're just, you know what, we're going to go to the private where we're not getting touched. And I think that was a part of it.
I think part of the thing with Kansas is, and I'm trying to word this so it makes sense, but like, everybody talks about like the rut, and like, it just takes one hot doe, right, for your property to blow up. And I think the thing with Kansas is like, you look at a state like Wisconsin, like 40% of the state is cover. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That deer can bed in, or they have the habitat they need. 3% of Kansas is, you know what I mean? So you get one hot doe that starts getting pushed, she's not going to be on your property for more than, a few hours where you're hunting. So I think that's why you can see the extreme swings in Kansas of one day, 8:00 in the morning, it can feel like the rut is fricking on. And at 4:00 in the afternoon, you feel like, there's no reason even to be in the state. And I think we were talking for a deer to go, people talk about like bucks can come from anywhere. They might come from a couple miles away. Well, in Kansas, a couple miles is nothing. Those deer are putting on 10, 15, 20 miles a day, and I'm not saying they're going to go. I'm not saying they're going to go 20 miles directly away, but in their total walking distance, like, they're probably on their feet for 20 miles, It's just
it's just how it played out, and it was.
And I don't think the deer population there is anything to write home about. Just in my experience there, I think it's just the ratio of how many mature bucks there are to other deer. That.
And the other funny thing is that the first day when we pulled into camp, another guy showed up that like who was hunting, and he was talking to us. He's like, yeah, first time in Kansas? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, I've been coming, every year I can for the last 20 years. And he's like, it just ain't like it was. He's like 10 years ago, he's like, there was 180s here, there's 170s here. He's like, in the last, 10 years, he's like, you're lucky to see 130-inch deer. He's like, you used to be able to see 15, 20 deer sit. He's like, now you're lucky if you see 3. And I'm like, I'm not listening to him. He's just a naysayer. Like, you got to go find him. Fucking guy was right.
I think it's true. Even when I started going, I was 14, and like
it was, I mean, we could have, between 4 guys, we might see 20 different shooters that week or more, and now it's just, yeah, I mean, look at the draw odds there now. It's kind of starting to become an every other year type deal. You might get lucky and be able to draw twice in a row or whatever, but I drew last year with no points, but like
it's definitely getting harder, and I think it's because the deer population just isn't what it was. And what's funny is like there's a lot of food in that state, but not a ton of food that deer like.
Well, it's just
the habitat is
eating.
not great there per se.
In my only, like, you and I are gonna now forever have different perspectives on Kansas, but my perspective right now is I'd never go back. For the $700 it takes to get a tag plus the waiting period, you can go to Missouri, get a rifle tag and an archery tag for less than that, and I promise you're going to have way better odds at seeing and shooting deer. You're just going to have a better experience. And I'm like, for what it costed to what I saw, I'm like, that's not something I would ever do again. Like, not with a bow. Like, sure, if I had a point, my dad, some of my buddies now all have a point because I told them to buy one last year. Like, I think I would go for a rifle hunt. Just say, okay, we're gonna go for 6 days, and the entire time we're just gonna go push draws and shoot deer. Like, I think that would be fun. But like to go there and plan on hunting public to shoot a giant deer with a bow during the rut, I would never do it again. I would go somewhere completely different during those dates.
Well, and the thing that you really have to have, in my opinion, out there is a good decoy. I really think so. It's the encounters you have with deer when they're 150 yards away and you have a decoy in front of you are completely different than when you've got nothing to draw them over to you.
Sure.
So
no, I can kind of see that. I mean, we were just hunting different areas. Like, for the most part, I didn't have that where I could see more than 100 yards. There was a couple sits that I could on a field, but most of those sits I never saw a goddamn thing anyways. So I'm just, and my dad was more frustrated, I think, than I was because he's never really hunted out of state for whitetails, and he had heard a bunch of great things about Kansas. He's like, yeah, like Kansas, he's like, this is gonna be, his expectations were like mine. He was thinking we were gonna see 20, 30 deer a day, and we saw 20 deer the entire fucking trip. And he's like, he's like, I have a point, but I don't think I would even come pay to hunt out here. He's like, this was terrible. Like, we'd see more deer in the Price County forest of Wisconsin. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I think we would have. Like,
yeah,
not the caliber of deer, because I still think, of the deer we saw some nice bucks. We didn't see any giants, but we saw some nice bucks. It's just, yeah. I mean, that's kind of all I got to say about it. I burned that tag. I burned North Dakota. I fucking failed this year. It's kicked my ass. I'm kind of over hunting at the moment, but I already know next year I'll be right back at it with a different mindset. But I don't know what I need.
It is what it is.
I just want
you and I
an
are in the same
enjoyable
boat.
sit. Like, there's one thing to shooting a deer, shooting a really good buck, but there's more to me about hunting where it's like just like averaging really good sits is what keeps me excited.
Like you're in the game.
Yeah, it's just like enjoying seeing deer. Like, okay, if I sit 5 times and I didn't shoot a buck, like, that sucks. But if I sat 5 times and I didn't shoot a buck, but I was seeing deer, like your experience in Wisconsin, just because you didn't fill a tag, like, it sucks. But at the same time, like, man, you experienced the rut. And you and I have had this talk on a podcast where I don't know if I really ever have really experienced the rut. Other than at my work trip last year was the only time I've ever seen chasing and grunting and fighting. And like, my experience in November is exactly what this Kansas trip was. Year after year, it's like, I don't know what the rut is, and that's just a problem for me, I guess. That's why I try to shoot all my deer in October and September.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, anyways, we'll wrap it up here, but this is going to be kind of the first of we're going to drop on back-to-back days, so we're going to be recording another one tomorrow where we talk about gun season. This week is Wisconsin gun season. This weekend.
Open Saturday. So, fucking Brown is down, buddy. Spikes, Wisconsin 11-pointers. You name it. If it flies, it dies. If it runs, it's getting called. We're shooting everything. But we're also going to talk about Wisconsin traditions during the rifle season, like pre-rituals before, like the night before rifle season. Wisconsin's a crazy place to be. It's super cultural. Like, culture driven. Wisconsin's a cultural hunting state. So we'll go through some of our traditions, what we like to do, what we get excited about, and then our plans throughout the week, driving deer, strategies to try and shoot deer, and should be a fun episode.
Yeah, Gabe and I are going to be doing some hunting together next week, so
yep,
we'll have some good stuff for you.
So yeah, stay tuned. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Laters.